So, this is the question. How does a man become a professional cyclist for the first time in his life at the age of 37? A guy who raced from 15 to 18 and then from the age of 18 to 36 didn't ride a bicycle at all. Didn't have a road bike, didn't do any racing, didn't do any real endurance training. How is this possible? Hi folks, my name is Lee Rogers and welcome to the 7th edition of my channel, Crank Punk Rides on YouTube. So in the previous editions I've been doing reviews, some interviews, some bike rides around Taiwan. This video is a little bit different because it's basically focusing on my cycling career, if you can call it that. Somebody asked me recently, actually one of my subscribers, I'd like to say thank you to everyone that's taken the time to subscribe, I really appreciate it. But yes, somebody asked me what was my cycling career, because I've alluded to it a couple of times here and there. And so I decided it was time to kind of get out and to make a video detailing what happened to me and how I turned professional at 37 years of age after living in Japan for 10 years and ended up racing around the world with some of the world's greatest riders, with Cavendish, with Cancellara, with Boonen, with Stybar, with Andy Schleck, with Peter Sagan, no less, Hushovd. Yeah, I know I'm name dropping, but those are some names to drop. They dropped me actually, but anyway, I can still drop their names at least. From 18 to 36, I traveled the world. I was a scuba diving instructor in Thailand for a couple of years. I lived in Hong Kong, 10 years in Japan. When I was in Japan, I was teaching English. And then one day I found myself outside of a bike shop, hanging onto a bicycle that I just bought. And I suddenly thought to myself, what have I done? I hadn't missed cycling at all. I hadn't raced at all. I hadn't had a road bike during all of those years. And then sure enough, within a couple of rides, the competitive juices came back. I started to do some training. Within about 2 or 3 weeks, I had won a couple of little local sort of challenge races, nothing special. Within about 3 months, I joined a team. I was driving all over Japan to do these races. Within 3 races, I'd gone from being sort of Cat 3 in the Japanese level to riding with the pros and the elites, which was insane in itself. So if you'd like a bit more detail, please keep watching and I'll tell you how all of this happened to a guy who was basically dossing around for 18 years, wasn't really doing any real exercise, and then at 37 years of age becomes probably the world's oldest neo-professional. And also, as a result of this kind of late autumnal career, I've been very lucky in that now I work in the bicycle business. I'm also the communications director for the Taiwan KOM Challenge, which you may have heard of, and I'm also the official coach of the phenomenon that is Everesting. I'd like to say a quick thank you as well to Andy Van Bergen for making that happen a few years ago. And to all my Everesters out there, well done. If you'd like any information about coaching, please check the links at the bottom. And I'll also be adding a few other links to a few of the other stories that are detailed here. And if you do like this video, please like, please subscribe. That'd be awesome. There's loads more cool stuff coming soon. Actually, one of the next videos is going to be a review of this Brighton 750, just been sent to me. I'll be doing that soon. And with no further ado, let's get started.
I started cycling in 1987 and it was thanks to Pedro Delgado and more especially to Stephen Roche, because I was at home with my mum in the living room of our house in the northwest of England, and there on TV was the stage to La Plana, one of the greatest stages in the history of cycling, and it was that got me into cycling. And the next day I went to the local bike shop with my piggy bank money, about 150 quid, that was all. Ended up coming out with a Barry Hoban Special, very heavy bike, very cheap. But the name Barry Hoban was a famous name because, well, I didn't know it at the time. He had won 7 stages in the Tour de France between 1965 and I think it was 1975. And like I said, I didn't know that, but a couple of years later, an old guy introduced me to Barry Hoban on a bike ride. And there I was in Barry's garden shed, showing him the bike as he was showing me all his medals. That's what got me into cycling. That was the first bike that I had. And you know what, meeting Barry in that way, just by chance, that was the first of a few bookends sort of happenings that occurred during my cycling career. So I started racing time trials when I was 15, and then I think at the end of that summer or maybe the beginning of the next year I started doing road racing. And I was doing quite well. I was winning some and I was getting top 3, top 4. I was also falling off a lot, but that's another story. Unlike every young rider at any time, I think in the history of cycling, who gets into racing, you want to go to Europe and become a pro. And that was my dream as well. However, I totally quit for good at 18, or so I thought for good anyway. The reason being that although I knew I had some natural talent, I just didn't feel like I had that determination to just keep on going in this sport, because I wanted to travel and see the world. I wanted to go around. I wanted to have different experiences, and I thought at that time that the sport wouldn't lend me those sort of experiences. And at the same time, I also knew, I can be honest about it, I just didn't have the mental fortitude and the aptitude to stick with it. So although I did really enjoy it and I loved it, that was it. 18 years old, I was done. All right, wait for this. Cloud of the year. Whoa, look at that monster. Isn't that magnificent?
And so after that brief love affair with cycling was over, I went back to college and then I went to university, and then I ended up in Thailand for 2 years. I was a scuba diving instructor. And then I was in Hong Kong teaching English. I went to Japan as an English teacher as well. And I did a brief stint as a weekend priest marrying Japanese couples, a slightly atheist priest marrying Japanese couples. But that's another story altogether. When I got back into cycling, I fell in love with it all over again. But yeah, from 18 to 36, I didn't have any interest in cycling again, and I certainly had no interest in racing again. I didn't walk around thinking about what might have been. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I was quite happy with what I'd achieved when I was younger, just sort of enjoying myself and racing. And then, well, everything changed.
So there I was, just a few short months after even riding a bike for a long, long time. And then I started racing in the Japanese, sort of the proper racing really, the nationwide racing, the National League. My first race in Japan was in the 3rd tier. I came second in that race. That was in Hiroshima actually. And so they said to me, would you like to go to the next category, the 2nd tier? I said, yeah, sure. It's not easy to get top 3 in these races, but in the UK, you know, I'm sure like in the States and stuff, you have to accrue a certain amount of points. But the Japanese system was that top 3 in either the 3rd tier or the 2nd tier got bumped up. So in the next race, I was super, you know, motivated to do well. I ended up winning that race in the 2nd tier. And they said, would you like to go up to the 1st tier, to the Elite and Pro category? And I said, yes. And they said, are you sure? Get me up there. Couldn't wait. And then I ended up racing, with like the Japanese national champion and all the pros in Japan, and doing okay again. And the team that I was riding for, we were sponsored by Fuji Bikes. And there was a guy in Taiwan, a Canadian guy, who was the manager of the Fuji Bikes sort of factory team, a team called Fuji Asia. And he'd been speaking to the Japanese guys, and they said there was this English guy who was doing quite well, and he called me up and said, do you want to ride for the team? I said, do you realize that I'm 37? He said, yes, no problem. And yeah, I know it was a continental team. Some of you are thinking probably that's not really pro, but it is the 3rd tier of the professional cycling categories, World Tour first, then Pro Continental. And you know what? I had a contract. I wasn't getting paid much. It was literally pennies. I mean, literally pennies, that's another story. But I was suffering like a pro, I was training like a pro, and I was racing like a pro. And I ended up racing all over the world. I think I was the world's oldest neo-professional. And if you don't know what a neo-pro is, it basically means new professional. And generally, those neo-pros are 23, 24, 19, 18. And there I was, 37 years old and then 40 years old at the Tour of Oman and the Tour of Qatar. Yeah, I think I was officially the world's oldest neo-pro. And then in 2011, my then teammate Jarko Coupens, who is a Dutch guy, he's actually the manager of the Andy Schleck team on the women's UCI Pro Tour. So good luck, Jarko, and thank you for these amazing memories that you allowed me to have. God, I love that guy. It was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, he invited me to go over to do the post-Tour de France criteriums in Belgium and in the Netherlands. And if you don't know what those are, basically, these have been going on for, I think, since the 50s. The top riders from the Tour de France, just after the Tour de France when it finishes, they go up to Northern Europe, generally Northern France, Belgium and the Netherlands, and they take part in these city centre criteriums. And basically the idea is that all the big fans from these places, the heartland of cycling, they get to go and to see their, you know, the stars that they've been hearing about on radio or seeing on TV, and they also get to see some of the local legends flying around the city centre at insane speeds. And putting on an amazing show. So there I was, we got invited. Jarko had already ridden them, people around the town knew him, he was quite well known, quite famous locally, but nobody knew me, so we would go up on stage, like Heerlen was the first one we did, and they took us up on stage just after, I think it was Mark Cavendish and his teammate, and we're being introduced, and I was kind of like Lee Rogers. I was like, not quite embarrassed to be there, because I knew I had a right to be there, but just it was just overwhelming really, in a sense. And we get on the start line, and I'm not terrified, but I'm definitely not super calm, because I'm thinking to myself, just do not crash anyone famous, because that would be a disaster. And I think the next worry was, don't get dropped, because you don't want to embarrass yourself. And the thing about these post-tour crits is, still a lot of people don't know this, but these post-tour crits that they have, the top 10 are already decided. So one of the local pros comes into the changing room with the top 10 written on them, like it was Andy Schleck, Cavendish, da, 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 da. So the top 10 places are sorted, and they'll kind of break away with about maybe a third of the race or a quarter of the race left. But until that point, it's still breakneck speed. You're still going around corners like crazy. It's just endless, you know, like a typical kermesse. And there I am. I've only been in the country about 2 days, and I wasn't really at top race fitness. I certainly hadn't just come off the Tour de France. Yeah, and it was just, you know, mind-bending, absolutely insane experience, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And my favorite post-tour crit was the one in Maastricht. I interviewed Johnny Hoogerland just before. That was the tour where he'd been hit by the car and got caught up in the barbed wire. So I interviewed him beforehand. His legs were all scratched up, and we were talking about that. So he was there. Lauren Tendam was there. Also Tom Dumoulin was there, and 2 or 3 other really top big names. And it was raining, and there's cobbles. So for me, it was just like, for those guys, it's probably like, what a pain in the ass. For me, it was like, oh, this is amazing. And on top of that, there must have been, if I say 10,000 people, I'm probably under-exaggerating. There was probably about 15 to 20,000 people on the route. There was music everywhere, and you know, you could smell, the smell in the air was beer, cigars, pommes frites, and mayonnaise. And if you don't like any of those things, it would have stunk. But if you do like those things, and you like that sort of heady European bike race smell, oh, it was heaven. It was the best thing I've ever smelled in my life. And as we're going around, I actually, if I remember, I got into a break with 2 other guys, and they were calling out the names of the other guys in the break with me. Pretty sure it was Tendam in that one. We didn't speak about this, but I'm pretty sure it was him. Anyway, the commentator, you know, he's going over the speakers, and he's like, it's this guy, way, and it's this guy, way, and Lee Rogers. And he was like, hey. Nobody knew at all who I was, actually. But on one corner, there was these, I would just hear these people cheering for me every time I came around. Rogers, Rogers, go on, go on, go on. And later on, when the race finished, I was just sat by the side, you know, just sort of getting stuff packed away, and these 4 lads came over to me, and they said, hey. I said, oh, hey. They said, yeah, we're English. We were the ones who were cheering for you on the route. And I said, wow, that was fantastic. It was really useful. It really helped me. It was great to hear my name. And they said, yeah, we had no idea who you are, but we saw you were the only English person in the race, so we thought we'd cheer for you. So it's memories like that. And talk about an amazing bookend, you know, to go from sort of being 15, 16, reading about Paris-Roubaix, reading about, and I also rode that route as well when I was there. I didn't do the race, obviously, but I rode the route. For me, Belgium and the Netherlands, they were sort of the heartlands of cycling. The cobbles, you know, the inclement weather, the really tough riders, these hard men, and to be there racing with them. And also with the stars of the Tour de France, and with my friend Jarko. And after the race, sort of necking a couple of Belgian beers, it was mind-blowing. It was just incredible. You know, I can't, even now I can't put it into words. But if you're a cyclist, you'll have an idea of what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Well, that was the first installment of how I became a professional cyclist at the age of 37. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and please subscribe. That would be fantastic. Check out in the description below. There'll be some links to some of the stuff I've been talking about, like La Pagna with Stephen Roche, and also to my coaching website. If you're interested in coaching for Everesting or for anything else, please let me know. You can email me directly, lee@crankpunk.com. As ever, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you next time for part 2. Thank you very much.